Hello, Nora.
Hello.
So we had a really good first session. We talked about how you're having a separation with your husband, and because he cheated with your best friend.
Yes.
And you have two kids. You had a third on the way, which you just recently gave birth to.
Yes.
And then you mentioned that your dad was passing away. So you had a good first session. And then I noticed that over the past few weeks, actually it's been like a month now, where you had to cancel like a couple of sessions. You said you're out of town, but then you said that multiple times, so I wasn't too sure. You want to talk
You're
about
pushing on to me.
how it's going?
Yes. So part of it at the very beginning, like right after our last session, I gave birth. So that was a big thing, and kind of like taking a break to adjust from having two teenage kids to having a newborn again. And then also kind of figuring out the arrangement with my ex. So like when the kids are going to be with him and when they're going to be with me. And we kind of agreed on that I get them during the week to kind of help with like the school schedule, and he'll get them on the weekends. And then my dad passed pretty close to that. He was kind of on the verge, and then he just passed. And in his will, we got his house, so it was paid off. We don't have to pay for that, and there's a substantial amount of money. So we're pretty well taken care of in that regard. But soon after that, when we moved in, it was just like something just in me was like, this is too much, you gotta go. And so one day after school, I took the kids and we just got in the car and I just drove. And I drove to like a couple cities over, and I turned off the phone, and we used some of the money and we got a hotel and we just did random things, and I ignored all the calls from their dad. And when we got back, we were there for about 2 weeks. When we got back, he was mad, which I understand, but at the same point, he was understanding to the sense that like a lot had happened, so he didn't like call the police or anything for me taking the kids for that long without contacting him. But now he is petitioning to change our custody agreement. So that was kind of one that we agreed upon and we were both good with, and we hadn't really brought to court, but now he wants us to take it to court so that it can be like a legal thing and set in stone that he gets them on the weekends and I get them during the week.
Okay.
So it was a lot.
So you mentioned a lot. I just need a second to process everything, and then we can recap. Okay. So you mentioned you went into your new place that your dad used to have, and you had weekdays custody, and the husband or former ex-husband had the weekends. But then you decided that you went to take the drive, take your kids away. So that's a really big impulsion. So let's talk about how your mindset affected your behavior. What would you say? Guide me through in that moment. More of like what happened.
So in that day, we had kind of like moved in already. We had brought in our stuff. We had been living there for like maybe a week. And the kids were liking it. It was a little bit bigger than our old house. So they were like, they just like the novelty of it. And they've had a lot of changes too. So that was good for them. But when I picked them up from school one day, I had gotten like a lot of texts from him, and he was confirming like things in our schedule coming up, how they would affect his days, my days, and like wanting me to let him know as soon as I got these things and all these things. So like I had to go to the doctor's appointments for the new baby, and my teenagers, they have sports schedules and all of that. So it just felt like he was asking a lot for me. And although like we are at a better place than we were when all of that stuff had kind of unraveled, and I've been more like I didn't react how I initially wanted to impulsively react to that, and I think that was for the best. So it kind of is set us up well. But I think in that moment it was just going back to those feelings of like, why does he get to decide so much, and why is he asking so much from me? And that like, doesn't he know that there's a lot going on, that it just feels like he constantly wants to be in the know and wants to be involved. And I guess I do get that, because he only sees them on the weekends. But at the same time, it feels like I'm trying to create a new normal, and he's still having this influence of like, where are you? What are you doing? What's your schedule? And I just felt like I needed to go.
So I maybe be sensing a lot of frustration. I can see how that can make you feel like in a negative way, where you two are divorced, but he still kind of treats you like you're his wife, and
Mhm.
you should be talking more than what's needed. But maybe you just want to just have like minimal conversation. Less is about like the kids.
Yes, I think that's pretty accurate. I think in that sense, like maybe having a custody agreement would be beneficial into like we don't need to know everything. Like we just have to have the logistics worked out, and that's it. We don't need to. I think we've done it in a way that's like been really friendly and cordial, but there's still parts of me that it's like I'm not there yet. And then also trying to deal with like grieving my dad and raising a newborn baby with like not the most support around me
Yeah.
is difficult. Like the kids are really helpful, but they can only do so much. So I think, yeah, I could see how that would be a pro in like getting that arranged through the courts, but also just feels like another thing that I would have to adhere to. And then like, what if I don't adhere? But then what happens then? Like, what if I leave once we have that paper figured out with the courts, and then he's calling the cops on me? Like,
Yeah.
I think I'm scared of that, of what will happen if I like have a little bit of a impulse and then now it's like a really big consequence.
So definitely a lot of frustration, the legal system going back and forth. It must feel like a lot to handle, so I can empathize of how that's making you feel. But it's a big impulsion to like, take the kids away. Um, is there any other like impulsion that you've been having, or is that just like, is that the only main thing that you've had so far?
I think the main thing has just been like the need to just feel like I need to get away. And that's another thing too that he wanted to put into the agreement is that I can't take the kids within a certain like a rate like I think he said 100 miles from the town we're in
Okay.
without letting him know and for a certain amount of time. So that also feels like almost like he's parenting me, like that
Yeah.
he's forcing me to follow these conditions. And again, like I understand that what I did was really drastic, but I also don't feel like he's understanding like how much I've had to be understanding of him. I don't feel like I'm getting the same in return. But I think that has been the biggest impulsion is just to want to run.
Okay. And then how do you say it makes you feel that he's kind of like almost like suffocating you a lot?
I would say frustrating is a good word for it, like just irritated, and it just feels like I get over one thing with him and then it's another thing. And I get that like, and now we have a newborn, so it's like another 18 years at least that I'll have to be, well, I guess forever in his life with our kids. So coming to terms with that and like what do I want that relationship to look like? And I think maybe later I'll want it to be more friendly and cordial, but I don't know. It's a lot.
Okay. And then when you feel frustrated, like in your mind, how do you like react, like behavior wise?
So I think instead of acting like sometimes it's not impulse right away, I kind of remove myself and like I'll stop. Sometimes it'll just be like I stop responding to him for a day. And then the next day I've kind of like, okay, I read what you sent, blah, blah, blah. And then other days it's like, I think that was probably the most drastic of just like, I don't, I would be okay if I like didn't have to contact you again.
Yeah.
And I just took my kids and like took care of them without you and their life. But I know that that would be drastic in the sense that like he's a really great dad to them and like they have that good bond and he wants to be involved in their life. So I would feel a bit selfish to rob them from that, but it's really hard to be like considerate of that and also just not acknowledge that he is really suffocating me.
That's a lot to go through. I hope we can talk about, maybe some homework of when he does make you feel a certain way, how we can respond, maybe like in a better manner. Maybe we can talk about, like pausing for a second, thinking about how we should respond, and then, maybe have a discussion about, how to better, like raise the kids and not, like argue like back and forth, like how to be civil, basically, maybe is the main thing.
Yes, that seems good.
And then we also talked about from the first session, like how you're gonna talk to the kids about the separation.
Mhm.
How has that whole experience gone so far?
It went well. I think, like, I guess I didn't realize how much, even if I was in denial, maybe like because I was pregnant, but they could see like a strain. So, and we did it, I feel like in a pretty much, we did it together. So apart from like before when I just wanted to tell them and I just wanted them to be like, that's your dad, that was kind of like restraining and being like, we can have a age appropriate conversation with them, like letting them know, we are going to be separated, but that's not going to minimize like us being your mom and us being your dad and the love we have for you. So it went over well. Like they were a little upset, but it wasn't. It was better than I think than I expected. Like we didn't stay there long. They seemed to be pretty resilient and like okay, and just kind of. I think it's also because it's new and we're still trying to figure out like how does that work, with us both wanting to be really involved in their lives, but also like a little annoyed with each other. So I say so far it's been good, but it feels like we're just at the very beginning of it.
Okay, I can see, how I'm actually appreciated. I'm glad that the kids handle this in a good manner. Because for me myself, I've gone through a similar situation where my parents separated. And I had like a similar experience of having a good like response and then going through the motions of going like back and forth.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that you're having a similar experience. And then how would you say, your kids are going through, like from weekdays to weekends? Is it good transition, or how would you describe it?
I guess I haven't, there's been so much with me that I haven't really like, I do feel like I'm a mother first. So a lot of times, like, that's how I've been able to handle these situations. Like, well, think of the kids. What would you want best for them? But then sometimes my mind is like, well, best for them would be to do X, Y, and Z. That maybe isn't best. But I think in sense of like the transition wise, I haven't really thought a lot about how that could be affecting them, like going back and forth. And maybe they want to be at their dad's longer and just feeling like personally me thinking that that's not the best thing for them and like that it would be better for me to have more time with them, but I guess in doing that I'm kind of um mm, underestimating their relationship with him and like how much that they would want his involvement as much as he wants to be involved.
Okay,
So I think it's something I need to put more thought into.
okay. And then, it's been like a month since you separated, and how would you say, you're feeling like, going forward? Are you gonna talk about, any, um, like the standards, or like how much communication you're gonna have, like between yourself, and like the kids and the father, like how much can you incorporate, any like input into the parenting?
I think it showed me like just in this month that separating was the right decision. That like these situations, even though some of these situations would be we wouldn't have to deal with them if we were still married, like who gets them when and things like coordinating different schedules. But at the same time, like I think I would be holding a lot of resentment and I would just be like stuffing it down until it just popped up into moments of rage or impulse or things like that. So I would be curious of like how I would react then if we were still together. But into terms of like logistically after that situation, like I I realized that that was wrong to just take them and not
Yeah,
confirm with him, especially like the way that he tried to put it back on me was well, what would you do if I had taken them and like not? And I know that like I would have freaked out if I didn't know where they were or if I didn't. But in my mind, it feels like two different things. And I know that's a little hypocritical, but it feels like I was okay with him not knowing, but I wouldn't be okay with not knowing. So I think like working into our logistics is a big thing, like putting in those I don't know, I think setting in stone how we want to move forward. I feel like we haven't quite done that, but I also don't know what I want that to look like.
Okay. So you stated a lot. You talked about how you might have resentment. How did you feel after your portion, like when you came back?
Um, I felt like a part of me felt free, like just to be gone and to have done it. I felt like kind of liberated and I felt good about it. But then having to face him and like hear his side of it and like the worry he felt. And also I hadn't thought about like the things that he could have done, like putting out a missing persons report or different like more legal things that probably would alter me and like maybe getting custody of them in the future or feeling like maybe the court's thinking that I'm unstable.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not, but sometimes I guess. But so I think a lot of the things like I didn't realize when I done it, I didn't really think it through. I wasn't thinking of how he would react when I did it. But I did know like after a certain amount of time that I was gonna have to go back. Like that maybe, moving away wouldn't be the worst option, but the way that I did it of just leaving, I knew like that couldn't have been a long-term thing at that time. So I kind of knew I would have to face something, but I didn't think about what that something would be.
Okay. We've talked a lot about how's it been with the separation, the kids, and then your father passing, and then like your best friend cheating with your husband. How have you like managed like all that stress?
I think because it's like if it was, I think if you would have talked to me like a year ago and where I felt like my life was pretty put together, like my dad was healthy, I thought my marriage was good, my kids are great, my friends great, and then one of those things happened, I almost feel like I would have reacted worse, but I think, or I would have reacted like more instantly. But I think because it's been like a juggling act of so many things, but like knowing that my priority is always going to be the kids, and then everything else kind of has to go underneath that, but like at what extent. Um, so I think like how I've gotten through it is just like focusing on them, but then that sometimes can be like I'm focusing too much on them, like I'm putting too much into that and not really like going through working with my grief for my dad or like processing that I'm living in his house and I feel like I shouldn't be living in his house or like that it's only been a couple months since I found all this stuff out about my ex-husband and now my best friend who I usually would go in to talk to, I can't. And then like, so just not having that external support anymore is I think been really difficult.
I can see how that makes you feel. Losing a loved one definitely has a negative impact on you. I've also lost a parent before, so definitely it makes you feel like almost like depressed. So I hope you're managing that while also raising your kids and then having good communication.
Yes.
We do have about like a minute left. So it's been a great session. We shared a lot of information today about the separation and raising the kids, the custody battle that you're going through. How do you feel now that you've talked a lot about in today's session?
I feel like it's been good because a lot of it, especially like with me canceling and kind of doing it on my own, I feel like I've been self-processing, but that hasn't always, I'm biased. So I'm like, so what I'm kind of reaffirming or like justifying with myself, kind of bouncing it back and looking at it with more like reason and logistics behind it, I think has been beneficial for me because I know that like I often want to act in impulse, but the longevity that I can't see at the time is like gonna bite me in the butt. So I think it's been good to kind of like process things with you and like talk things out and look at them a little bit more logistically.
Awesome. So I'm glad you had a positive session today. And then I'm gonna end off with just giving you some homework. So whenever you have any like negative interactions with your ex-husband, I want you to practice maybe some deep breathing. So when he makes you feel like he's suffocating you or treating you like you're below him or like he's in charge, let's practice maybe taking a step back, taking a big deep breath, hold it for 3 seconds and let it out for 3 seconds.
Okay.
So take some deep breaths. And then also maybe we could practice writing down any times where he tells you anything like negative, and then what you're thinking in your mind and how do you feel like responding behavior wise,
Mhm.
and how you also like maintain holding back like your emotions.
Okay. Okay, I can do that.
Awesome. So thank you for coming in today, Nora.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you in the next session.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.